Okay, welcome again to Theories of Reality. I'm Professor Bardale, and we're going to continue talking about free will today. And I think let me call it the middle course here. Okay. Yeah. Show you where we're going here. It's week 6, by the way. Registration is ongoing. I registered for the classes I'm taking. Taking fencing this term, a little tender right here. That's where they hit you with the points. The girls, they all have these breastplate protectors. The guys, they don't get that. They just have to get jabbed. Neither is a point on there. It's a fun class, by the way. If you want to get in shape and do something in a feat like fencing, it's kind of fun. Okay, let's see. JB 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. There's a reality. So we're in week 6 already. If you're interested in contemporary moral issues, there are 20 spots for that. There's also an honor section. It's kind of a nice little feather in your cap. It looks good in your transcript if you take an honors course. The only extra thing you have to do in there is do a paper and a brief presentation in class, about 15 minutes, and then there'll be a question and answer thing on some topic that interests you. So that's next term, same deal as this class. More discussion focused, and we have the student presentations, I think, are the last week and a half. Sometimes they're squeezed into a week depending on how many honor students we have. So there's an honor section with 10 students, 10 seats there. So you can sign up for that. Even if you're not in the honors program, you can still take an honors course. And then there's 20 just regular classroom student sections. And then there's a video section if you want to watch stuff later on, although you won't be able to jump in and argue with somebody who's, saying something really, really wrong. And it'll be on the tail end of primary season, so it should be some interesting discussion. It's interesting how things are turning out. My prediction of a Trump juggernaut and a Sanders surge both turn out to be correct, and we might be looking at Sanders versus Trump in the general election, with third-party candidates pulling their usual 1%, if that. Okay, so this week, free will. Next work, free will, and next week, free will and the existence of God. So the exam is slated to open week 7 on Tuesday, February 16th. And again, you'll have a complete week to take it. Same drill as the last exam. If you want to come by for help reviewing, feel free to do so. Make an appointment, come by office hours, etc., etc. And there's a practice exam with 5 sample questions, and it'll cover, so this second exam will cover everything from life after death, starting with the Cranix in chapter 4, and chapter 5, all the stuff about free will. And there's a lot on life after death and free will, so that's all the second midterm exam. Okay. Any questions about that? Yeah. Chapters 4 and 5, right. And it'll open on Tuesday. So when we split like in the middle of the week, we'll finish free will and we'll do some review, and then on Thursday we'll start in with the argument for God's existence, and that and the meaning of life stuff's going to be what the final's about. Okay, last time we were talking about this argument from determinism in physics. Whoa, somebody's using green. What a terrible choice. Black. And you think about this, we live in a material world, so you get, again, how do people make decisions? Well, it's psychology. What is psychology based on? You know, it's your brain, right? Biology. Neurophysiology. Biology is reduced to chemistry. Chemistry is reduced to physics. And there are physical laws that govern all this stuff. So when you're making a decision, your brain is operating according to the laws of cause and effect. You have a perception. You make an assessment about what's happening. You have certain feelings. Hormones are coming into play. Whether you see attractive member of the opposite sex, or whether somebody's threatening you with a gun, there's a response there, right? Or maybe somebody makes some scurrilous comment about the peccadillos of your favorite political candidate, right? So all those things create reactions based on what you think someone says, what you think it means, and what's really going on. Well, something's going on in your brain, and that's it's electrochemical energy operating in there. It's just a biological machine. It operates according to the laws of cause and effect in the same way that a spaceship does, or a jet airplane. It's the reason that spaceships and jet airplanes and computers and all that stuff work most of the time is because the laws of cause and effect don't have any exceptions. And usually, if something's not working, you can troubleshoot it and figure out, okay, well, here's something that went wrong because this machine is slightly different than this other one that's working perfectly. So different antecedent conditions, different result, right? So why isn't this car starting, right? Well, it's because a tire that fell out on the middle of the freeway ruptured the battery, and all of the battery acid is leaked out. This happened to me on my recent trip, right? So and you have another car whose battery acid is still in the battery, and it works just fine. So the same thing, if you get a person, and you have a sort of normal, functional human being, and he's got, nurturing parents that love him, and he grows up with having his basic needs met, and he has positive role models. He's probably going to turn out to be okay. But you get some other person who's from a broken home, early divorce, substance abuse in the house, poor role models. He's going to turn out to be a delinquent. Now, sometimes a person who comes from a disadvantaged background turns out to be okay and sort of surprises everyone. But do you think that's free will, or what might the determinists say about that? I was given this example, right, of the two people here, two kids growing up, right? Actually, I used the gunpowder case, didn't I, serve you? So you have this kid, right, and he's got, no father, not not like the daughter of God or something, no human father, but doesn't know who his father is. Just suppose it's a boy, and boys tend to be predisposed more to delinquent behavior, and not having a male role model seems to be a particular problem. No father. Mom is crack addicted prostitute. Poverty.
It's just not winning in life.
No. I forgot what else we said was bad about him. Oh, abuse. I'll just put abuse. I'll specify. Maybe let's give him like a speech impediment that makes he has like a lisp or a cleft palate or something, so people make fun of him. Speech. And maybe he's got like a learning disability. Maybe it's related to fetal alcohol syndrome. Right, fetal alcohol syndrome. That's when your parents drink so much that you're born a drunk. I mean, you're born with an undeveloped brain because that alcohol was coursing through your mother's body while you were in the womb. Alcohol syndrome. This darn board. And the kid grows up to be president, right? Not likely, right? It's not likely he's even going to, make it through high school without ending up with trouble with the law, being a delinquent of some sort. So, and the determinists will say, it's no more possible for this guy to have to turn out okay than it is for you to light some gunpowder and fire and have nothing happen. It's the laws of cause and effect. Now, if you get different antecedent conditions, you might get a different result. So suppose you have, positive male role model. Right. So if you have that, you're gonna get a different result, right? So maybe there is a friend of the family that takes an interest in him. Maybe he's part of like a foster, or what do you call it, big brothers, big sisters thing, right? So he's got a big brother. Maybe he goes out and starts working out at the gym, and some a guy at the gym takes an interest in him and teaches him how to box or what have you, or weightlifting, or maybe he ends up just through happenstance, one of his friends works out at a martial arts studio, and he learns respect for himself and others, and how to defend himself, and ends up overcoming all this. But in the absence of some sort of positive influence, all these factors are going to determine what happens to him in life. And this is probably, maybe this gets into the behaviorist model a little bit, because I'm talking about, these are environmental things. But I think the argument from determinism in physics says, his brain is just working according to the laws of physics. And it's not like the laws of physics have exceptions. Things always turn out the way the antecedent conditions, all the conditions before the effect are. So same conditions, same effect. So what about this argument? What do you think? Does he have a free choice to not become a delinquent? Any thoughts on this? Oh, let's take another example, right? So you take like somebody, like you have a drug dealer, and he gets a dog from a shelter. And because he's sampling his own product, he's sort of erratic. And he punishes the dog for no particular reason, and rewards the dog when he's sort of in the mood. And the dog has no way of hooking up its behavior with whether it gets rewarded and punished. So the dog is sort of randomly punished and randomly rewarded. And the dog is like also trained to attack, because this guy does this, so he like trains in the backyard with, wraps a bunch of cloth around his arm, and trains the dog to attack, to bark, to be territorial. He leaves it chained up for long periods of time outside, exposed to the elements, yada yada, right? So how's this dog going to grow up? Well, it's going to be vicious, neurotic, unpredictable, likely to bite people for no reason. That's just the way. That's the way it's. The laws of psychology say that when an animal, and a human being is an animal, when an animal has no way of understanding how to avoid pain and get pleasure, it ends up being neurotic, erratic, It becomes frustrated and then lashes out in aggressive or violent behavior. And the same thing with a human being. A human being's a little smarter than a dog, and that in some ways makes it worse for the human being, because the human being can understand lots of things but can't figure out, particularly when they're really young, why am I being punished? Why am I angry all the time? So, so the idea, the sort of Pollyanna idea that everyone has this ability to make a free will choice, to overcome their obstacles and be a productive, happy human being, the determinists would say is just an illusion. Yeah.
So with this kid, there is nothing or no one for him to look up to, and it's very rare for him to grow up to become maybe good citizen or a good person in society. It is possible though. It's actually possible, but chances are very rare and slim.
Yeah, so maybe the deck's stacked against him. Now, why might he turn out to be productive? Well, role models don't even necessarily have to be a person that's in your life. It could be maybe a sports star on TV, or maybe it's like Star Trek. I've heard inspirational stories of people they learn about self-respect and values and stuff from watching TV, from whether it's Star Trek or the Brady Bunch or whatever it is. So there's cultural messages in there too, maybe from school, maybe from a teacher, right? So it's hard with human beings. It's really hard to figure out what's causing what. So. But the determinists would say, look, if you have a person that has all these negative influences and they turn out okay, there's going to be something different with this person than there is with the guy that didn't turn out okay. And it's not so you have a person, suppose you have somebody who's just been arrested, right? And they've been arrested for shooting up Coke and robbing the 7-Eleven store, right? And you take them in and question them, and you look at their background. And how likely do you think it would be that they have two loving, modestly well-off parents, that they've had no behavior problems in the past, that they are a straight A student, that they have lots of friends, and no psychological issues? Zero. You look at people in prison, they've always got lots and lots of problems. And almost all of them had tough childhoods where there was abuse in the home, there's substance abuse, there's poor role models, no father, or the father's abusive, and so on and so forth. Yeah?
Well, I actually go to the prison a lot to play soccer with the inmates over there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there's a guy that I spoke with, that was the first crime he ever committed. That was the taste of alcohol and smoked, and it just took him to another level, and he killed someone. That was his first crime. He has a really good background and everything. So it's actually possible that we could find a child whose parents are good and everything, but just because of the influence of friends or the influence of some kind of intoxication.
Yeah, but peer pressure and alcohol is But then the question is why did he? I suppose lots of people get drunk, but lots of people get drunk and don't kill anybody. So the question is sometimes people get so drunk they die from alcohol poisoning, but they don't kill anybody. So the question is, what's different with him that he did kill someone?
Friends.
Right? What's that?
Friends.
Friends, yeah. So maybe he's more susceptible to peer pressure. Now, does he have control over that, though, is the question. Maybe he does a naturally docile personality. Maybe he looked at maybe his father was kind of weak and absent. Maybe his mother was domineering. I don't know. So the behaviorist and also the determinist in general is going to say there's going to be something different about him that made him kill, that's different from the other person that got drunk and got subjected to peer pressure and didn't kill anybody. So I don't want to pry too much on the example. Was he just sort of in a fight and it was manslaughter, or is it premeditated murder?
Pretty much his own friend. They got drunk and they were high, on a really high story.
Oh, and they got in a fight and he pushed them over or something.
Yeah.
So they're
That's by accident.
manslaughter. So maybe that's maybe that's just sort of, there's this thing called moral luck. Sometimes these things happen, right? Maybe if they weren't in a position where somebody might fall, they just get in a drunken fight and sleep it off. Sometimes you just be unlucky, like be on the freeway when a truck tire falls out of the back of a pickup and have it hit you, right? You're just in the wrong place, the wrong time. Yeah.
So, what about I guess exceptions? I'm pretty sure Ted Bundy was a bar-accredited lawyer, and he worked with, I think on Richard Dale, one of these political machine guys,
Right, yeah.
campaigns, and he spoke very highly of him. And he went on to kill God knows how many people. So, I don't know, how does that fit into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Ted Bundy. Oops. I'll withhold the jokes about bludgeoning college students to death in their sleep, and how maybe Ted wasn't such a bad guy. He probably he had a lot of frustrations to work out or something. But so he was from a privileged background, right? Privileged background. Does anybody know any particulars of the Bundy case? I know a little bit. So occasionally make jokes about my white panel van and fake cast. I'm going out for a bit in the van. I'll be back in a little while. He would have this thing where he'd have these crutches and a fake cast, and he'd be pretending to be struggling to get into his van. And then someone would come up and try to help him, and then he'd get the chloroform. And, I think that here you might say maybe there's just something wrong with his brain, that he's is sort of maybe this is a guy who's just sort of abnormal. Abnormal brain. I don't remember. You look at these guys, there's a kind of a profile for the serial killers. Usually they've tortured small animals when they're young, and they show this streak of sadism, and they show a lack of empathy. And about 1% of the population seem to be psychopaths. It's that some of them become, tobacco executives, some become politicians, some become lawyers, and some become serial killers.
What's the difference?
I was just going to say that also coming from a privileged background and working in politics is really stressful, and you have a lot of people look at you in a way you have to meet these things and stand up to these standards, so that could also make someone go crazy, I feel like.
So, but I think that the idea, do you wake up one day, this is, okay, here's the libertarian position. I'm going to pretend I'm a determinist, and I'm going to talk about what a libertarian would say about Ted Bundy. One day, Ted Bundy was laying in bed and woke up in the morning, and it was a bright spring morning, and he got out of bed and he said to himself, you know what, I think I'm going to make a free will choice today, become a serial killer. And I'm going to put away all my human feelings of empathy and my guilt over harming others and all those things of morality. I'm going to put it all aside, and I'm going to go out and kill women for fun. And it's not realistic, right? I think that it started out, he actually did this interview with James Dobson from Focus on the Family. It's the conservative evangelical group. And basically he blamed sadomasochistic porn for his start. He sort of started watching this stuff on I think this is even pre-internet too. He'd look at, bondage and S&M magazines, and he get this idea of doing bad things to helpless women. And then the first time he did it, he said he felt sick. He actually vomited, and and felt horrible. But also there was a certain thrill to it. And so instead of, not doing it again, he like ended up doing it again and again and again and again. And the more he did it, the easier it became. And then at a certain point, he became so habituated to it, became addicted to it. It was like a drug to him to kill. It's like a lot of other addictions, like smoking cigarettes, right? Who takes the first drag of the cigarette and goes, oh, that's great, right? Most people cough and sputter. Sometimes people throw up. But if you keep on doing it, then then you get habituated to it. So you might say he's got an abnormal brain. Maybe they're influence of sadistic porn, and maybe the combination of the two, right? So maybe most people, they look at like sadistic porn on the internet and they don't turn into serial killers, right? But maybe it's his abnormal brain, his lack of human empathy, and the sort of model of that made it look enticing to kill women was sort of together explosive combination. Other thoughts on I don't know, what makes like do people that do bad things, do they like serial killers or murderers, do they wake up one day and say, I make a real choice, become a career criminal, a robber, or whatever? It seems like that's like usually what happens is people get screwed up, they have lots of problems, there's something wrong with their brain, and they go wacko and kill somebody. Yeah.
So like our legal system defines it as two different things. So like McNaughton rule, which is adopted in a lot of states, states that if the person doesn't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
then they can get they
Right.
can't use the insanity case. Whereas reasonable denial or something, I forgot what it was. It states that if you wake up one day, it's like the bad hair day kind of rule. Like if you wake up one day and you're like, oh, kind of want to go kill some people,
Uh-huh.
and then you go out and kill some people, that could still, if you wake up and you could prove that insanity ensued that day, you could actually get off with insanity. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a famous case of Leopold and Loeb in the 30s, I believe. Loeb, I think it's spelled. And William Jennings Bryant that defended them. And basically he said, you have these two privileged college kids, and college-aged young adults, going to an elite school. And they did this thrill kill where they abducted this 12-year-old boy and killed him just to see what it would feel like. And so they were finally caught, and they got this fancy attorney. It's like somebody else. Now I'm blanking out. I don't think it was William Jennings Bryant. It was somebody else. It was like a famous lawyer from that time. Who's the guy that did the Scopes monkey trial? Blanking out. Maybe Google it.
It was William Jennings Bryan. I don't remember the other.
Was
guy
William Jennings Bryant? William
He's
Jennings
part
Bryant
of
was on he was like the anti-evolution side, right?
I think so.
It's Clarence Darrow. Okay, Clarence Darrow is the guy that defended him. And he essentially said they're not responsible for their actions, society is. Society produced these two people, and no rational person of carrying your empathy would ever do something like that. It must be this privileged, warped, this privileged background, this warped society that they were raised in, which caused them to do this. And they end up avoiding the death penalty and getting long prison sentences. One of the guys actually got out.
They called it affluenza.
Affluenza. Yeah, there's a guy right now that they are using that term about. So the idea that society is responsible. And you think about there's no personal responsibility in determinism. Let's maybe move into there's the let me back up for a minute. This idea of cause and effect, the argument from physics, and then we'll get back to the determinism thing. Because we've sort of gone afield to the argument from physics is, again, we live in this world of cause and effect, and human beings are not outside the world of cause and effect. We're part of it. We have material bodies. So, but you might say the body is material, but the soul isn't. So the idea of the soul or the mind is where decisions are made, and that's free. So even though your body is determined, the soul is free. And this is like something Descartes might say, right? You're an embodied soul, and where you make your decisions. You make your decisions in your mind, your soul, which is different from your body, different from your brain, and not subject to the laws of cause and effect. So that might be one way you could go. Another way you could go is you might say that maybe matter's not determined. But matter determined. That matter doesn't behave according to these deterministic laws. If you look at modern physics, it says that it's a matter of probability. And this goes back to this argument based on Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty. Let's put Heisenberg in down here. So Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty is the same physics that says in the basic structure of the atom, you can't make predictions about how fast an electron is going and where it's at. So if you can tell where it's at, you don't know how fast it's going. If you know how fast it's going, you can't determine its position. You can't tell where it's at. So there's what's called the Copenhagen interpretation of Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, which says that the reason you can't figure it out is because it's random. Essentially, there's this randomness in the very structure of matter. So if it's random and unpredictable, then it seems like that might make room for free will. You going way back to the first atomist, Democritus. Democritus said that you make all your decisions in your brain, and he actually knew that the brain was the seat of consciousness, or believed that, and had some good reasons for believing that. And it took a while for people to come back to that. But he said, every once in a while, one of the atoms in your brain swerves for no apparent reason, because matter is just sort of unruly stuff, and it doesn't, although generally it obeys these deterministic laws, occasionally stuff happens that you can't account for. And that's that element of randomness. And he thought that made room for free will. Every once in a while, an atom zigs when it should have zagged, and that explains why people do things out of character, why people make split-second decisions one way as opposed to another way, why things don't quite turn out how you think they will, why people have unpredictable behavior. So what do you think about these as a rebuttal to this argument for physics? So one says we're not purely material beings, so maybe the body's material, but the soul isn't. So we're not. Maybe I'll put this in, like in the test, I might have something like we aren't material beings. I need a thinner line here. We're not material beings. We're not purely material beings. We have this spiritual component, and that's where decisions are made. So that's one our objection. And the other one says that, okay, even if we are material beings, matter doesn't obey these deterministic laws. Modern physics says it's more iffy. Karl Popper has this thing where he says, matter doesn't behave like clocks, it behaves like clouds, right? You can't really predict the weather with any certainty. You only have you have degrees of probability. So if you're trying to figure out what's going to happen, tonight or tomorrow, pretty good. You get the 10 days out in the forecast, and it starts to get really iffy. And it's the same thing with matter. It's just sort of the probabilities there. There's certain things that you maybe be fairly accurate about predicting, but lots of other things that get more iffy. Any thoughts of either of these two arguments? Cover these. And move on to the behaviors thing then, because that's kind of what we've been talking about. And probably the example of like the delinquent and the serial killer are probably more, they probably fit better in with the behaviorist argument. But anything you think about, that there's sort of two tacks. One is to say, well, it all boils down to your brain and neurophysiology and the laws of physics. And then the other tack that says it's all behavior. And so don't think about like how the decision is made, you just look at inputs and outputs. So here's the environment, so nature and nurture. So this is an argument about nature. Now we're looking at the argument about nurture or about environment as opposed to what's going on inside your brain, which might be inherited, or there might be some environmental factors, I suppose. But generally speaking, I think we're looking at the argument from physics focuses on human nature, and the argument from the behaviorist argument focuses on environment. So B.F. Skinner wrote this book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, did lots of writing and experiments, mostly with animals, with mice and pigeons. And Skinner says, look, if you look at behavior is conditioned, right? So we're conditioned as human beings to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and depending on our environment, we'll have different strategies for trying to do that. And you're determined by your environment, the habits you form about how you try to get pain and get pleasure and avoid pain. How you do that, it's just determined by your environment. So if you're like, again, raised by parents that say, take you to the store and like hide, things inside the stroller to try to shoplift, or they're doing drugs in the house, and maybe nobody's working in the house, right? That's going to present a certain way of life to you, and you're going to habituate yourself to that. As opposed to, like, say, another situation where both your parents are working, or one's working, the other one's staying home and taking care of you. Maybe you see your mom or dad be given too much change, and they don't realize it until they get into the car and they go back and return the money, right? So you get a whole different way of looking at things, and you become habituated to those things. You have a tendency to want to please your parents. You have all these natural proclivities, but your environment's going to determine how they play out. So let's see. Behaviorist arguments is the second argument. We act as we have been conditioned to act. So what do you think about this as an argument? Right, this is basic psychology, right? Conditioned response. You're looking at your psychology book. Does it have a thing? Well, okay. Ordinarily, the conditioned responses act this way, but occasionally someone makes a free will choice, and we just have to ignore all this stuff. No, psychologists will say conditions of response to environment. That's the way the human mind works. It's not like there are all these exceptions, which are the free will choices people make. People act according to the things they've been conditioned to do. It's like Pavlov's dog, right? You ring the bell and bring it food. You ring the bell, you bring food. You ring the bell and bring food. You ring the bell, and all of a sudden the dog's salivating, waiting for the food to come. And it's like everything like that. Like you, you're a kid and you see something bright and shiny and you want it, you're in the store and you reach out for it, and maybe your parent takes your hand and says no, and like gives you a big frowny face. You don't like the frowny face, you crave approval, and so you associate that with pain. And so maybe you might, but you really like the brightly colored thing, and it looks really interesting and fun, and you reach out for it again, and maybe this time, ouch, it'll slap the hand down. And maybe you cry, right? And then next time you see that like brightly colored thing in the store, you think about putting your hand up and you're like, oh, the last time I tried to grab something in the store, it got slapped down. Maybe I shouldn't do that, right? So you have an aversion to it now. And maybe you get a complex about like brightly colored objects, or maybe next time they take you to the store, you cry before they even get you in the door because you remember being slapped, having your hand slapped. And maybe you have fear of supermarkets. Like lots of things can happen, right? And it's matching up pleasure and pain. Sometimes it's accidental. That's why people get phobias about things. So how could you ever like get beyond your conditioning? Any thoughts of that?
Change environments.
Yeah, I suppose you change your environment and
So reconditioning?
yeah. So this is what Skinner says, that what we need to do is recognize that human beings are behave according to their environment. So what we need to do is have social engineers create environments that create functional as opposed to dysfunctional behavior. So there's no freedom and dignity. There's no right and wrong. There's just functional and dysfunctional. So what you want to do is create rewards and punishments that make people want to obey the law, make them want to treat others with, I say respect, but not steal stuff and break things, not put their stupid little squiggle on the bathroom stall, right? Or on, or whatever, right? Or in the nice, on the nice clean white wall, or not shoot up coke and rob the 7-Eleven store, or beat their kids, or commit whatever crimes, right? We want people to work hard, to be productive members of society, to have fulfilling relationships, to be happy and healthy. And so the idea is that you just need to have the right conditioning program. This is like that Cass Sunstein guy again I was talking about. He has this idea that you just sort of have these little nudges where you nudge people in the right direction. Little tax for this thing that you don't want people to do, little subsidy for this thing you want people to do. And if you set it up that way, right, it's like, I don't know, like, let's think about the way things are now. Like, you think, oh, I'm so hungry. What will I buy? What will I have to eat? And you see the French fries, which look really delicious, and they're $1.25. You're like, oh, I could just like eat French fries for lunch, and it'd be $1.25, and the ketchup is free, right? And then it's like, or I could get a salad for like $5. And I'm like, oh, or I could get some like organic, wrap for $6. And it has an effect on your decision, right? Maybe you want to eat healthy, but maybe you're poor and you want to save your money too. You end up going with the French fries. And so like I think Skinner would say, create a society where the French fries are $10 and the salad is $1. And then you're going to have people making healthier choices. And don't expect a person to go against nature and say, oh, I'm going to have the salad instead of the French fries, and because the French fries are more delicious, and you have all these natural proclivities towards eating like fattening foods and salty foods and sweet foods. So you engineer things where you're rewarding person extra for doing the healthy thing, and just add multiply that stuff times a million. You subsidize the solar panels and recycling and all this stuff, right? So it's like the recycling, right? So if recycling was just doing it because it's the right thing to do, you probably wouldn't get a lot of compliance. You might get some, but it's like that 5 cents a container. It adds up, and homeless people collect them, and people don't want to throw away the money, and so they like save them and go to the machines and feed them in one at a time. Kind of a stupid way of doing things, but why do people do that? Why do people spend hours of their time feeding these things? It's because they don't want to lose money. And so you engineer the perfect society where people recycle, people don't commit crimes, people respect the property of others by conditioning people to act in the right way. And right not meaning like absolute right and wrong, but just functional versus dysfunctional. So thoughts on Skinner, what do you think? Is it all stimulus response? I'll put this up there, social engineering. Is that what we should be doing? I'm gonna throw one more thing on there, like Mayor Bloomberg, right? So he might be running for president. Make things more interesting. Mayor Bloomberg had a tax on, not a tax, there wasn't even a tax. He banned 32-ounce sodas. He said, if you want to get a soda with sugar in it, I don't even know if he likes, I don't think this applies to diet ones. But for soda, you couldn't get any more than 16 ounces. Now, why would a person pass a law like that? Well, sugar is bad for you, and drinking your calories is bad for you. And the high fructose corn syrup is bad for you, but just plain sugar is bad for you too. But the soda is filled with high fructose corn syrup. And like a 32-ounce soda itself probably has like, I don't know, 300 or 400 calories, just drinking it down, right? You could have a nice meal for that much. And so people are getting obese, they're adding to the healthcare rolls and costing the city money, and people are unhealthy. So Bloomberg says, well, to make people healthier, to make them weigh less, we're gonna save them from themselves, and I'm not gonna even put a tax on, I'm just saying no, 16 ounces is as big as you get. So you don't become big as a house. And so he passed that, and people, now some people that are diehard soda fans, they'll go and they'll buy 2 16-ounce sodas, right? But most people are like, oh, they just get the biggest size available. And, you have the effect of people drinking less soda, people weighing less, and people having less diabetes and all the complications from extra calories and extra weight. Seems like a good result. What do you think? And it's based on these deterministic principles. You guys are kind of quiet today. No thoughts on the government, the engineering your behavior for your own good? $5
They
tax
kind
on
of already
cigarettes?
are. So it's like they might as well do it for the good, because like you said, you can get around it and buy 2 sodas if you really die-hard soda fan, but just a little inconvenience of not having 1 container will switch your decision.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on how much you love your soda. Yeah.
I think with like food and drinks, it's okay for the government to like step in, but because sometimes like American society doesn't know like what's like really bad for them. Like obviously like 32 ounces of soda isn't good, so I think it's a good idea. But if it's like other realms of society, like I don't know, other areas like outside of food, it's a little dicier.
Dicier?
Yeah.
Like, I think of other things. Like, promiscuous sex. I mean, you could have in some countries they have like a religious police that make sure people don't have promiscuous sex, and then like stone people to death and stuff. Or they whip them publicly, right? People have promiscuous sex, they spread disease, there's unwanted pregnancies, you can solve a lot of problems that way. Oh, that's going too far, right? But then the question is like, where's the point? But the idea is that all we're doing is we're trying to get a good result. We're trying to get people to behave in ways that's going to benefit them and make them more healthy. Now the libertarian's going to say, this is kind of, I get to make my choice, and if I want a 32-ounce soda, then I should be able to get a 32-ounce soda. And I think what the libertarian will say about the behaviorist argument here is mention this. Libertarian in the environment can affect or predispose people to act in certain ways. But not determine them to. And this is the idea is influence. But influence isn't determination. Does it influence me, if I'm a smoker, that there's like a $5 pack tax or whatever it is? Or does it influence me that I have to get two smaller cups instead of one big cup? Well, yeah. Does it influence me that healthy organic food is more expensive than fast food? Well, yeah. Does it influence me that oil is cheaper than solar power? Sure. All those things add up. So, but it doesn't mean that I'm caused to act in those ways. It just kind of pushes me in that direction. But I can always push back if I want to. So I can make a free choice. So these are things that government and social engineer use to sort of make it a little harder for you to do what you want and make it easier for you to do things that you want them to do. But that doesn't mean you don't have a choice at all. It just means it's sort of an insidious way of trying to undermine your capacity for free choice and kind of coerce, or not, coercion is probably the wrong word, to influence you, to persuade you to act in a certain way. Yeah.
So like, if you can't rely on people to make their own decisions, make good decisions, how can you rely on the government, which is made up of people, to enforce laws, to make us do what they determine is right?
That is an excellent point, and that's sort of like I suppose more of a political point than a point about determinism. But yeah, it's Frederick Bastiat has this thing. He says, this idea that you can't trust human nature because human beings are bad and selfish and greedy. But then he says, but what if the legislatures, are they made of a different stuff than your average Joe? Are they the people, the politicians they're just as, if you think human nature is greedy, corrupt, selfish, and abusive, then why would you want to take a human being like that and give him power over others? That seems like a bad idea. But as far as like the kind of the case for social engineering, you could say, well, all you're really doing is you're changing behavior of people overall. But when it comes to any individual's choice, they still have a free choice. It's just that the deck's kind of stacked against them, and they're being influenced, they're being persuaded or even coerced, but they still have a free choice. So it doesn't show there's no free will. It just sort of assumes there's no free will, and so therefore there's nothing wrong with social engineering, which I think the libertarian will disagree with. Okay, let's take our 10-minute break and talk about the psychoanalytic argument. But not determine, does not turn them. Sorry. It's just influence, it's not determination.